Mrs. Ledner took me to show my room. Perhaps here better give a short description of the arrangement of the rooms. अब ये rooms की आज arrangement बताएगी. This was very simple and can easily be understood by a reference to the plan. Plan तो हम लोग देख ही चुके हैं. On either side of the big open porch were doors leading to two principal rooms. That on the right led to the dining room where we had tea. जैसे ही घुसते थे right side पे dining room tea. The one on the other side led to an exactly similar the living room, which was used as a sitting room and a kind of informal workroom. Hmm. And that is a certain amount of drawing other than strictly architectural was done there, and the more delicate pieces of poetry were brought there to be pieced together. The poetry के delicate pieces piece होते थे, बात करते थे, थोड़ी बहुत drawing जो कि architectural नहीं थी वो बनाई जाती थी. Though through the living room one passed into the antiquities room where all the finds from the day were brought in and stored on shelves and in the pigeonholes, and also laid out on big benches and tables. उसके बाद लिविंग रूम जो था एंटिक्विटीज रूम था और चुप्पी की सारी फाइंडिंग जो थी जो कि डिग की थी वो रखी जाती थी. फ्रॉम द एंटिका रूम देयर वाज नो एग्जिट सेफ थ्रू द लिविंग रूम. एंटिका रूम से जो तुम लिविंग रूम में वापस नहीं आ सकते मतलब बाहर नहीं आ सकते थे, तुम्हें लिविंग रूम से बाहर ही आना था. बियॉन्ड द एंटिका रूम बट रीच थ्रू अ डोर व्हिच gave on the courtyard was Mrs. Leidner's bedroom. एंटिका रूम जो था और एक कोर्टयार्ड के थ्रू से जाता था तो मिसेस लाइडना का बेडरूम था. दिस लाइक द अदर रूम वाज ऑन दैट साइड ऑफ द हाउस एंड हैड कपल ऑफ बार्ड विंडोज लुकिंग ओवर द प्लॉट कंट्री साइड. मतलब उसकी कुछ एक विंडोज थी जो बार्ड थी जो कि कंट्री साइड की तरफ हो रही थी. राउंड द कॉर्नर नेक्स्ट टू मिसेस लाइडनर्स रूम बट विद नो एक्चुअल कम्युनिकेटिंग डोर वाज डॉक्टर लाइडनर्स. मतलब मिसेस लाइडनर फिर उनके साथ डॉक्टर लाइडनर्स रूम. दिस वॉज द फर्स्ट ऑफ द रूम्स ऑन द ईस्ट साइड ऑफ द बिल्डिंग. ईस्ट साइड ऑफ द बिल्डिंग में पहला रूम जो था वो ये था. नेक्स्ट टू इट वॉज द रूम दैट वॉज टू बी माइन. अब मिस्टर लाइडनर रूम के साथ जो थी रूम किसका था, इसका था यूनिवर्सिटी. नेक्स्ट टू मी वॉज मिस जॉनसन विद मिसेस एंड मिसेस मिस्टर एंड मिसेस मकाडो बियॉन्ड. फिर इसके साथ मिसेस जॉनसन का फिर मिस्टर एंड मिसेस मकाडो का रूम था. आफ्टर दैट came two so-called bathrooms. दो so-called bathrooms थे. When I once used that last time in the hearing of Dr. Eli, he laughed at me and said a bathroom was either a bathroom or not a bathroom. तो अमेरिकन जो है वो बाथरूम कहते हैं जबकि यूरोपियंस जो है वो बाथरूम नहीं कहते. बाथरूम मतलब उनके लिए बाथरूम ही होता है, उनके टॉयलेट नहीं होता. अमेरिकन बाथरूम बोलते हैं ना. All the same, when you have got used to taps and proper tumbling, it seems strange to call a couple of mudrooms with thin hip bath in each of them and muddy water brought in kerosene tins bathroom. All this side of building had been added by Dr. Leidner to the original Arab house. The bedrooms were all the same, each with a window and a door giving onto the courtyard. Bedroom सारे थे, सबके में एक डोर था और एक विंडो था जो कि कोर्टयार्ड में आ रहा था. Along the north side were the drawing office, the laboratory and the photographic rooms. North side में क्या था? Laboratory, drawing office और photograph. To return to the veranda, the arrangement of rooms was much the same on the other side. There was a dining room leading into the office where the files were kept and the cataloging and typing was done. Corresponding to Mrs. Leidner's room was that of Father Levigny, who was given the largest bedroom. He used it for decoding or whatever you call set of tablets. तो मिस्टर जो लेविग्नी थे उनको एक सबसे बड़ा रूम दिया गया था जिसमें कि वो टैबलेट्स को डिकोड करते थे.
पापा को भी दे दें.
हाँ.
पापा का मूड कैसा है?
In the southwest corner of the was a staircase running up to the roof. अभी डाउन था, अब ठीक हो गया हो.
अभी डाउन था.
नहीं मजाक कर रहा हूँ.
नहीं था.
In the southwest corner was a staircase running up to the roof.
बेवकूफी का उत्तर दे दिया.
कोई बात नहीं.
आज की रोटी प्रमोद लाया.
हाँ.
हमारी अम्मा ऐसे बनाती थी. हमने कहा आपने कभी नहीं. हम क्या बोलने की जरूरत है.
आप सी कैटेगरी इशू में हमारा टाइम मत लगाओ. कोई मतलब थोड़ी है सी कैटेगरी इशू पे. In the southwest corner was a staircase running up to the roof. On the west side were first the kitchen quarters and then four small bedrooms used by the young men, Carey, Emmott, Reiter and Coleman. At the northwest corner was the photographic room with dark room leading out of it. Next to it was the laboratory. Then came the only entrance, the big arched doorway through which we had entered. Outside were sleeping quarters for the native servants, the guardhouse for the soldiers, and stables, etc., for the water houses. The drawing office was to the right of the archway, occupying the rest of the north side. I have gone into the arrangements of the house rather fully here because I don't want to have to go over there again. उसने पूरा घर समझा दिया. As I say, Mrs. Leidner took me around the building and finally established me in my bedroom, hoping that I should be comfortable and have everything that I wanted.
मिसेस लाइडनर कौन थी?
राइडना की बीवी, जिसके लिए तो लेके आया ना.
जिसके लिए लेके आए, अब हमें बार बार रिपीट करना पड़ा.
कोई बात नहीं माँ. The room was nicely, though plainly furnished: a bed, a chest of drawers, and a washstand and a chair. एक chair, washstand, chair. This thing. The boys will bring you hot water before lunch and dinner, and in the morning, of course. गर्म पानी जो तुम्हारे रूम में आ जाएगा. Lunch, dinner, or morning में. If you want it in any other time, go outside and clap your hands, and when the boy comes, says, "Jib my har." Do you think you can remember that? Jib my har. Jib my har मतलब मेरे को गर्म पानी चाहिए. I said I thought so and repeated it a little haltingly. That's right. And be sure and shouted. Arabs don't understand anything in an ordinary English voice. तो उनका accent अलग है, तो अरब voice में ना शोर with चिकना jib my har जैसे बोलते थे. Languages are funny things, I said. It seems odd there should be such a lot of different ones. Mrs. Leidner smiled. There's a church in Palestine in which the Lord's Prayer is written up in 90, I think it is different languages. एक पैलेस्टाइन में जहाँ पे कि भगवान की जो भक्ति है 90 लैंग्वेजेस में की जाती है. Well, I said I must write and tell my old aunt that she will be interested. Mrs. Leidner fingered the jug and basin absently and shifted the soap dish an inch or two. An inch or two soap dish को किया था. I hope you'll be happier, she said, and not get too bored. तुम बोर नहीं हो, तुम खुश रहो, भगवान करे. I'm not often bored, I assured her. Life's not long enough for that. She did not answer. उसने कहा बेटा सब काम पे जाएंगे, बोर मत होना. I hope you'll be happier. She continued to toy with the washstand as though abstractedly. Washstand के साथ जो था abstractedly. Suddenly she fixed her dark violet eyes on my face. और उसने सवाल पूछा. What exactly did my husband tell you, nurse? मेरे husband ने तुमसे क्या कहा है? Well, one usually says the same thing to a question of that kind. I gathered you were a bit run down and all that, Mrs. Leidner, I said glibly, and that you just wanted someone to look after you and take any worries off your hands. आप परेशान हो, कोई चाहते हो कि कोई आए और आपका दुख दर्द बांटे. आप उन्होंने यही कहा. She bent her head slowly and thoughtfully. Yes, she said. Yes, that will do very well. This was just a little bit enigmatic, but I wasn't going to question it. Instead, I said, I hope you'll let me help you with anything there is to do in the house. You mustn't let me be idle. She smiled a little. Thank you, nurse. कुछ भी काम हो तो मेरे को बता देना. ठीक है ना? क्योंकि मैं अगर आइडल हुई तो मैं पागल हो जाऊंगी, नर्स ने बोला. Then she sat down on the bed and, rather to my surprise, began to cross-question me rather closely. I say rather to my surprise because from the moment I set my eyes on her, I felt sure that Mrs. Leidner was a lady. And a lady, in my experience, very seldom displays curiosity about one's private affairs. But Mrs. Leidner seemed anxious to know everything that was to know about me. Where I trained, how long ago, what had brought me down to the east, how did it come out that doctor really had recommended
एक
me.
लेडी पर्सनल बातों में इंटरेस्ट लेगी.
ज़्यादा नहीं लेते. They maintain that distance. वैसे गोरे वैसे लेते भी नहीं ज़्यादा. She even asked me if I'd ever been in America or any relations in America. बात कुछ है. इतना पूछ क्यों रही है? One or two other questions she asked me that and seemed quite purposeless at the time, but of which I saw the significance later. Then suddenly her manner changed. She smiled, a warm sunny smile, and she said very sweetly that she was very glad that I had come, and that she was sure I was going to be a comfort to her. कुछ एक सवाल के उत्तर उसको ऐसे लगे कि बिल्कुल ठीक है, और सडनली मिसेस लाइडना ने स्माइल किया और कहा कि यू आर वेलकम. She got up from the bed and said, would you like to come up to the roof and see the sunset? It's usually very lovely about this time. तुम मेरे साथ छत पे चलोगी सनसेट देखने के लिए, बड़ा सुंदर होता है. आई एग्रीड विलिंगली. चलो चल चलते हैं, मुझे तो अच्छा लगता है. As we went out of the room, she asked, were there many other people on the train from Baghdad? Any men? जब तुम बगदाद से आ रही थी तो क्या बहुत सारे लोग थे, कोई आदमी थे? I said I hadn't noticed anybody in particular. There had been two Frenchmen in the restaurant car the night before, and a party of three men whom I gathered from the conversation had to do with the pipeline. She nodded and a faint sound escaped her. It sounded like a small sigh of relief. मतलब इसको कुछ डर है कि कोई आ रहा है उसके पीछे, मुझे ऐसा लग रहा है. We went up to the roof together. हम दोनों roof पे गए. Mrs. Mercado was there sitting on the parapet, and Dr. Ledna was bending over looking at a lot of stones and broken pottery that were laid out in rows. Mrs. Mercado बैठी थी और डॉक्टर लेडना जो थे वो पॉटरी को देख रहे थे. There were big things he called coins and pestles and cells and stone axes and more broken bits of pottery with queer patterns on them that I've all seen at once. अजीब अजीब तरीके की पॉटरी थी पुरानी. Come over here, called out Mrs. Mercado. Isn't it too beautiful? Mercado ने कहा, देखो कितना सुंदर है. It certainly was a beautiful sunset. रेगिस्तान में जब sunset होता हो तो बड़ा सुंदर होगा. Hasena in the distance looked quite fairy-like, and the setting sun behind it. And the river Tigris flowing between its white banks looked like a dream river rather than a real river. इस पूरे रेगिस्तान में एक रिवर बह रही है, टिग्रिस. ऐसा लग रहा है जैसे सपनों में जा रही हो, और पीछे एक सूर्यास्त हो रहा है. Isn't it lovely, Eric? Said Mrs. Leidner. The doctor looked up with abstracted eyes, murmured, lovely, lovely, perfectly, and went on sorting potsherds. फिर क्या हुआ? Mrs. Leidner smiled and said, archaeologists only look at what lies beneath their feet. The sky and the heavens don't exist for them. तो मिसेस लाइडनर ने कहा, देखो आर्कियोलॉजिस्ट है वो धरती के नीचे ही देखते, ऊपर ऊपर ज़्यादा देखते नहीं, उनको मतलब नहीं होता. मिसेस मर्कादो गिगgled. Oh, they are very queer people. You'll soon find that out, nurse, she said. She paused and then added, we're also glad you have come. We have been so very worried about it, dear Mrs. Leidner. Haven't we, Louis? तुम आई हो, काफ़ी worried थे मिसेस लाइडना के बारे में, मिसेस मर्कादो ने कहा. Have you? Her voice was not encouraging. Oh, yes, she's really been very bad, nurse. All sorts of alarms and excursions. You know, when anybody says to me of someone, it's just nerves, I always say, but what could be worse? Nerves are the core and center of one's being, aren't they? बार बार डरा रही है. Nerves जो हैं, क्या बात है? Puss, I thought to myself. Mrs. Leidner said dryly, well, you needn't be worried about me anymore. Mary nurse is going to look after me. Certainly I am, I said cheerfully. I'm sure that will make all the difference, said Mrs. Mercado. We've all felt that she ought to see a doctor or do something. Her nerves have really been all to pieces, haven't they, Louis dear? So much so that I seem to have got on your nerves with them, said Mrs. Leidner. Shall we talk about something more interesting than my wretched ailments? मुझे डर लगता है, इसके अलावा कुछ और बात कर सकते, कुछ और इंटरेस्टिंग. I understood then that Mrs. Leidner was the sort of woman who could easily make enemies. There was a cool rudeness in her tone, not that I blamed her for it, but थोड़ी सी rude, enemies से बन जाता है, which brought a flush to Mrs. Mercado's rather sallow cheeks. She stammered out something, but Mrs. Leidner had risen and had joined her husband at the other end of the roof. तो मिस्टर लाइडनर दूसरे एंड ऑफ द रूफ पे गए, मिस्टर लाइडनर ने जाके ज्वाइन किया. लाइडनर, ये वो है ना. I doubt if he heard her coming till she laid her hand on his shoulder, and then he looked up quickly. There was affection and a kind of eager questioning in his face. क्या बात है? Mrs. Leitner nodded her head gently. Presently, her arm through his, they wandered to the far parapet and finally down the steps together. He's devoted to her, isn't he? Said Mrs. Mercado. Yes, I said, it's very nice to see. She was looking at me with a queer, rather eager sidelong glance. What do you think is really the matter with her, nurse? She said, lowering her voice a little. Oh, I don't suppose it's much, I said cheerfully. Just a bit run down, I expect. Her eyes still bored into me as they had done at the tea, she said abruptly. Are you a mental nurse? Oh, no, dear, no, I said. What made you think that? She was silent for a moment, then she said, do you know how queer she has been? Did Dr. Leidner tell you? डॉक्टर लाइडना ने बताया कि वो कितनी अजीब सी है क्या तुम मेंटल नर्स हो मैंने नहीं I don't hold with gossiping about my cases. On the other hand, it's my experience that it's often very hard to get the truth out of the relatives. And until you know the truth, you're often working in the dark and doing no good. Of course, when there's a doctor in charge, it's different. He tells you what it's necessary for you to know. But in this case, there wasn't a doctor in charge. अब मेंटल केसेस में क्या होता है रिलेटिव नॉर्मली पूरी इंफॉर्मेशन नहीं बताता थोड़ा मुश्किल हो जाता है ना तो थर्ड पर्सन बताता है तो नॉर्मली पढ़ती नहीं थी पर चूंकि इस केस में कोई डॉक्टर नहीं था इसलिए जो थी उसने बात करनी शुरू की डॉक्टर रियली हैड नेवर बीन कॉल्ड इन प्रोफेशनली and in my own mind it wasn't all sure that Dr. Leidner had told me all he could have done. It's often the husband's instinct to be reticent. कई बार husband अपनी बीवी को बचाते थोड़ा reticent हो जाते and the more honor to him to say. But all the same, the more I knew, the better I could tell which line to take. Mrs. Mercado, whom I put down in my own mind as a thoroughly spiteful little cat, was clearly trying to talk. Mrs. Mercado का मन था बताने के लिए. And frankly, on the human side as well as the professional, I wanted to hear what she had to say. You can put it that I was just everyday curious if you like. I said, I gather Mrs. Leidner has not been a quite normal self lately. Mrs. Mercado laughed disably. Normal? I should say not. Frightening us to death. One night it was fingers tapping on our window. एक रात बोली कि फिंगर्स जो हैं मेरी विंडो पे टैप कर रहे हैं एंड देन इट वॉज अ हैंड विदाउट एन आर्म अटैच्ड फिर एक हाथ आया और उसमें कोई आर्म नहीं था बट व्हेन इट केम टू अ येलो फेस प्रेस्ड अगेंस्ट द विंडो and when she rushed to the window there was nothing there. Well, I ask you, it is a bit creepy for all of us. और फिर बोली एक येलो चेहरा मेरी विंडो पे आया और जब वो विंडो के पास गई तो कोई नहीं था तो हम लोग तो सब घबरा गए Perhaps somebody was playing a trick on her, I suggested. Oh no, she fancied it all. And only 3 days ago at dinner, they were firing off shots in the village, nearly a mile away, and she jumped up and screamed out. It scared us all to death. और 3 दिन पहले क्या हुआ कि वो लोग गोलियां चला रहे थे तो ये एकदम भाग के बाहर आए और हम लोग सब जो थे ना वो डर गए
गोली कौन चला रहे थे
विलेज में वो अरब चलाते हैं ना As for Dr. Leidner, he rushed to her and behaved in the most ridiculous way. It's nothing, darling, it's nothing at all, he kept saying. I think you know, nuns, men sometimes encourage women in these hysterical fantasies. It's a pity because it's a bad thing. Delusions should be encouraged. Not if they are delusions, I said dryly. हो सकता है delusions ना हो. What else could they be? I didn't answer because I didn't know what to say. It was a funny business. The shots and the screaming were natural enough for anyone in nervous condition. कोई आदमी जो है nervous condition में short screaming में डर सकता है. That is, but this queer story of a spectral face and hand was different. It looked to me like one of two things. Either Mrs. Leidner had made the story up exactly as a child shows off telling lies about something that has never happened in order to make herself the center of attraction, or else it was, as I had suggested, a deliberate practical joke. या तो मिसेस लाइडनर को सपने आ रहे हैं या कोई उनके साथ मजाक कर रहा है, मतलब कुछ भी हो सकता है. It was a sort of thing I reflected that an unimaginative, hearty sort of young fellow like Mr. Coleman might think very funny.
वो जो लड़का था,
वो जो कोलमैन आया था ना, उसको लगता है कि बहुत फनी होगा ये. I decided to keep a close watch on him. Nervous patients can be scared nearly out of their minds by a silly joke. Mrs. Mercado said with a sideways glance at me. She is very romantic looking, nurse. Don't you think so? The sort of woman things happen to. Have many things happened to her? I asked. Well, her first husband was killed in the war when she was only 20. जब वो 20 साल की थी तब उनका पहला हस्बैंड मारा गया था. I think that's very pathetic and romantic, don't you? It's one way of calling a goose a swan, I said dryly. Oh, nurse, what an extraordinary remark. It was really a very true one. The amount of women you hear say, if Donald Arthur, whatever his name was, had only lived. अगर वो बस रह जाता तो ये ठीक रहती. And I sometimes think if he had, he'd have been a stout, unromantic, short-tempered, middle-aged husband, as likely as not. It was getting dark and I suggested we should go down. Mrs. Mercado agreed and asked if I would like to see the laboratory. My husband will be there working. I said I would like to very much, and we made our way there. The place was lighted by a lamp, but it was empty. Mrs. Mercado showed me some of the apparatus and some copper ornaments that were being treated, and also some bones coated with wax. Where can Joseph be? Said Mrs. Mercado. She looked into the drawing office where Carrie was at work. He hardly looked up as we entered, and I was struck by the extraordinary look of strain on his face. It came to me suddenly, this man is at the end of his teeth that very soon something will snap.
क्या कब क्या हुआ?
मतलब केरी जब ड्राइंग कर रहा था तो लग रहा था बहुत टेंशन में है, तो ऐसा लगेगा वो चिल्लाने वाला है. And I remembered somebody else had noticed that same tenseness about him. और किसी और ने कहा था बहुत टेंस सा लग रहा है. As he went out again, I turned my head for one last look at him. He was bent over his paper, his lips placed very closely together, and the death's head suggestion of his bones was strongly marked. Perhaps it was fanciful, but I thought that he looked like a knight of old who was going into battle and he was knew he was going to be killed. ऐसा लग रहा था केरी जो है बहुत परेशान है, उसके मुख पे बहुत ज़्यादा टेंशन है, वो काम करते रह रहा था. And again I felt what an extraordinary, quite unconscious power of attraction he had. We found Mr. Mercado in the living room. He was explaining the idea of some new process to Mrs. Livna. She was sitting on a straight wooden chair, embroidering flowers in fine silks, and I was struck anew by a strange, facile, unearthly experience. She looked a fairy creature more than flesh and blood. अब वो गई ड्राइंग रूम में और उसने देखा कि मिस्टर मर्कादो मिसेस लाइडनर को कुछ बता रहे थे, और जब उसने नर्स ने मिसेस लाइडनर को देखा, कहा ये बड़ी सुंदर औरत है. Mrs. Mercado said, her voice high and shrill, "Oh, there you are, Joseph. We thought we'd find you in the lab." He jumped out looking startled and confused as though our entrance had broken a spell. He said stammeringly, "I must go now. I'm in the middle of a..." He didn't complete the sentence, but turned towards the door. Mrs. Leitner said in a soft, drawling voice, "You must finish telling me something some other time. It was very interesting." मिस लाइनर ने कहा बहुत इंटरेस्टिंग था, मेरे को बाद में कभी बताना. She looked up at us, smiled rather sweetly in a faraway manner, and bent over her embroidery again. In a minute or two, she said, "There are some books over there, nurse. We've got a quite a good selection. Choose one and sit down. Nurse तुम book pen के pen डाल. I went over to the book shelf. Mrs. Mercado stayed for a minute or two, and then turning abruptly, she went out. As she passed me, I saw her face, and I didn't look like the look of it. She looked wild with fury. मिस्टर मर्कादो को ये शक है कि मिस्टर मर्कादो जो शायद है वो मिस्टर लेडनर पे लट्टू हैं. ऐसा हो सकता हो. In spite of myself, I remembered some of the things Mrs. Kelsey had said and hinted about Mrs. Leidner. I didn't like to think they were true because I liked Mrs. Leidner, but I wondered nevertheless if there might perhaps be a grain of truth behind them. कि मिसेस लाइडना दूसरे औरतों को आदमियों को आकर्षित करती हैं. I didn't
मिसेस मद्रास का
Mr. McCallum. I didn't think it was all her fault, but the fact remained that the dear ugly Miss Johnson and that common little spitfire Miss Mercado couldn't hold a candle to her in looks or in attraction. Miss Johnson और ये जो थी मिसेस मर्काडो एकदम एवरेज लुकिंग थी. मिसेस लाइडना बड़ी सुंदर थी. And after all, men are men all over the world. You could see a lot of that in my profession. Mercado was a poor fish, and I don't suppose Mrs. Leidner really cared two hoots for his admiration. But his wife cared. It wasn't, if I wasn't mistaken, she minded badly and would be quite willing to do Mrs. Leidner a bad turn if she could. I looked at Mrs. Leidner sitting there and swinging at her pretty flowers so remote and far away and aloof. I felt somehow I ought to warn her. I felt that perhaps she didn't know how stupid and unreasoning and violent jealousy can be, and how little it takes to set them smoldering.
क्या हुआ
मतलब इसका मन था कि मिसेस लाइडनर को वार्न कर दे कि तुम ये जो मिस्टर मर्काडो के साथ वो कर रही हो,
हंसी मजाक
हाँ, ये ठीक नहीं है, रिस्की है. And then I said to myself, Amy Lathran, you're a fool. Mrs. Leidner's no chicken. She's close on 40 if she's a day. I mean, she must know all about life there is to know. But I felt all the same, perhaps she didn't. She had a queer, untouched look. I began to wonder what her life had been. I knew she had only married Dr. Ladner 2 years ago, and according to Mrs. Mercado, her first husband had died nearly 20 years ago. I came and sat down near her with the book, and presently I went and washed my hands for supper. It was a good meal, some really excellent curry. They all went to bed early, and I was glad, for I was tired. Dr. Ladner came up to me to my room to see if I had all I wanted. He gave me a warm hand clap and said eagerly, She likes you, nurse. She's taken to you at once. I'm so glad. I feel everything's going to be all right now. His eagerness was almost boyish. I felt too that Mrs. Leidner had taken a liking to me, and I was pleased it should be so. But I didn't quite share his confidence. I felt somehow there was more to it than all he himself might want to know. मतलब कुछ और चक्कर है जो कि हो सकता है डॉक्टर लाइडनर को भी नहीं पता हो. There was something I couldn't get at, but I felt it in the air. मतलब कुछ एयर में है कि कुछ गड़बड़ है. You know. My bed was comfortable, but I didn't sleep well for all that. I dreamt too much. The words of a poem by Keats that I had to learn as a child kept running through my head. I kept getting them wrong, and it worried me. It was a poem that I'd always hated. I suppose because I had to learn it whether I wanted it or not. But somehow, when I woke up in the dark, I saw a sort of beauty in it for the first time. Oh, say, what ails thee, nights at arms alone? And what was it? Palely loitering. I saw the knight's face in my mind for the first time. And it was Mr. Carey's face, a grim, tense, bronze face, like some of those poor young men I remembered as a girl during the war. And I'm sorry for him. And then I fell off to sleep again and saw that the belly dame at Sans Mercy was Mrs. Leidner, and she was leaning sideways on a horse with an embroidery of flowers in her hand. And the horse stumbled, and everywhere there were bones coated in wax. And I woke up all goose flesh and shivering and told myself that curry never had agreed with me in the night. कल पढ़े फिर
पापा से मामा की दवाई डाल